Optimism in Action is produced in collaboration with KAZU, your NPR station for the Monterey Bay area of California. You'll find this episode and archived episodes at kazu.org/sidebar.
The solutions we develop here can serve as models for the rest of the world. That is the optimism. And that is what makes Monterey Bay Aquarium such a special and effective place.
That's today's guest on Sidebar, Aimee David, Vice President of U.S. and California Ocean Conservation. Aimee is also the Director of Ocean Conservation Policy and Initiatives at the Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Sidebar is brought to you by Monterey College of Law, San Luis Obispo College of Law, Kern County College of Law, and Empire College of Law, located in Santa Rosa.
Welcome to Sidebar, featuring conversations about optimism in action with lawyers and leaders inspiring change. And now your co-hosts, Jackie Gardina and Mitch Winnick.
Mitch, I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. I grew up in Iowa, and I didn't even see the ocean until I was over 20. And then when I moved to California, one of my favorite things to do was to walk on the beach in the early morning. And I really came to understand how fragile the ocean is and how we need to care for it more. And I don't think as a landlocked kid, I really understood that. So I'm really excited that today we get to speak with Aimee David. She's the Vice President of U.S. and California Ocean Conservation, and she has led the Monterey Bay Aquarium initiatives in California to establish the nation's first statewide network of marine protected areas, to prohibit the trade of shark fin products, ban plastic grocery bags, and defend against the expanded offshore oil and gas drilling that is happening in California and elsewhere. So really excited to learn more about her work, about the aquarium, about what we can all do to protect the ocean that we take for granted.
Aimee, we're glad to have you today. Unlike Jackie, I grew up on the Gulf Coast. With the oil platforms right there within sight and the many disasters that we had while I was growing up with oil slicks, whether it was issues with the ships or issues with the drilling rigs, I was very aware of the interaction between our relationship as people and the way we were treating the ocean and the resources not far offshore. I'm looking forward to hearing what you're doing and excited to hear some of the innovative things you're doing. So welcome to Sidebar.
Thank you so much, Mitchell and Jackie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Aimee, I'm going to ask a question that is a little bit off of the aquarium conversation and more about you, which is, how did you get into the work? Were you always thinking you wanted to work in the arena that you're in now?
I grew up just around the corner from the Gulf Coast in Miami, Florida, and I spent a lot of time in and around the ocean. Like a lot of people, I fell in love with the ocean from a young age as soon as I had exposure to it. I loved looking at the wildlife. I loved just the feeling I had being in and around the ocean. As I grew up, again, like a lot of people I talked to, I wanted to be a marine biologist and started on the science track in college. Then realized a science career maybe wasn't especially what I was interested in. I knew enough at that point that what looks pristine and what looks full of life, as you said, is very fragile. And so I started to investigate what are some careers where I could take more of standing up for the ocean. Of course, the ocean can't speak for itself. And then it kind of took me into ocean management, ocean policy. And several years later, I find myself at Monterey Bay Aquarium. It brings the ocean to life to so many people who weren't fortunate like me to grow up where I could just jump in. And it also uses this love and respect to go out into the world and fight for policies and fight for conservation actions in order to protect ocean health. And I'm a part of that effort.
Aimee, I think a lot of people look at an aquarium or visit an aquarium and they see it almost like Disneyland, but just Disneyland with water. They don't really think about all the work you're doing behind the scenes or the platform it provides you to do as you have organized these efforts on policy and environmental issues. Talk a little about that relationship.
Well, it was such a wonder coming to Monterey Bay Aquarium because of the reputation that it enjoys with so many people in California, but also around the world. It immediately evokes such strong emotional feelings, a big smile. I love that place. I went to that place as a kid and I still remember it. The service that the aquarium does in bringing people to the ocean. I think we think about in the visitors that come every day. What we don't realize is that same affinity and trust is also with people who grew up to be government leaders, business leaders. What the aquarium realized was that it can leverage that goodwill and bring our science-based information to those people in those positions of power and authority and help develop decisions and solutions based on it. I think people absolutely still think of aquariums as that experience, which is so important. It's a thrill for me to be here to talk about how much aquariums across the country are amplifying that impact through all the ways in which we're working in society to restore and protect our beautiful wildlife.
Let me just ask a question that goes along with our theme, which is optimism in action. I would think that it's just incredibly rewarding working in this area. First of all, the wildlife you deal with, I've seen it. I'm local here in Monterey, and my wife and I go all the time. We're members, and it just blows you away. And then all the different exhibits you provide that are educational as well. On the flip side, gosh, I would have to believe that some of the issues you're dealing with, for example, microplastics, just to pick one, can get so discouraging and overwhelming. Is there optimism to address some of these issues?
I think there absolutely is. And plastic is such a good example of that. I think plastic pollution, a lot of people think about that now or are aware of it a lot more than even 5-10 years ago. And that issue came to our doorstep because it's this tangible thing that when it first kind of hit the zeitgeist was really about its impacts in the ocean world. We have an obligation for stewardship of the natural world. And especially since we had the attention of the public on this issue, we knew we had an in terms of, okay, we think we can be part of the solution. And learning about the true impacts of plastic, not just in the ocean environment, but on the land, and even now we're seeing in human health, was incredibly sobering. And you realize that it is not just the straws that end up in the ocean, it is the scale of production of plastic, how much is in the environment, and about how all these millions of pounds of plastic that have been produced since it originally came online, 9% has been recycled. So what's going on with the rest? We could have stopped there and said, this is too big. But fortunately, this is why it's wonderful to be in California, because California is the center of innovative thought and policy. And because we're the fifth largest economy in the world, the solutions we develop here can serve as models for the rest of the world. We went to our legislative leaders and started at the local level, then went to the state level and said, how can we start solving this issue here? We brought scientific information to the legislature. We co-sponsored bills to reduce plastic pollution. And we brought the public along with us. We send action alerts. We give them actions that they can do and also ways to communicate with their government leaders. That is the optimism. And that is what makes Monterey Bay Aquarium such a special and effective place.
And I want to encourage people to go to the Monterey Bay Aquarium website because it has an amazing amount of information about some of the plastic effects that, Aimee, you just talked about. But I want to segue to a slightly different but related topic. One of the things about plastics, in addition to the trash aspect and the microplastics, is petroleum is used to create them. And you've been very involved in trying to not just limit plastics, but limit offshore drilling.
Climate change is the biggest existential threat, not just to the ocean, life on Earth. And the ocean plays such a huge role, on one hand, helping to mitigate the impacts. It absorbs excess carbon emissions, it absorbs excess heat, and all of that is taking its toll on the ocean. And so that is one way in which the aquarium does feel really responsible for taking one of many reasons why the aquarium feels responsible for taking action on climate change. And we've also seen the destruction that oil spills can do in the marine environment. I think the Gulf, we've seen just massive oil spills and the destruction it causes off of California. The 1969 Santa Barbara oil spill caused huge devastation and sparked our essential environmental policies that we have in our country today. So part of it is ending any new offshore oil and gas in California. We have been successful in doing that in certain places, including Monterey Bay, which is National Marine Sanctuary. And then a lot of the times we don't just want to tell people what not to do, we want to point them to a better future. And in this case, it is a renewable energy future. It is taking actions to conserve energy and to be more efficient and to promote policies that can help us transition from a society built on fossil fuels to one that relies on energy sources that enhance our lives instead of makes it unhealthier.
And I want to ask you about that because I've read stories about these proposed offshore floating solar farms, floating wind farms. On one hand, my mind goes, okay, that's a move away from petrochemicals. But on the other hand, it's a little hard for me seeing those as a good environmental balance either. Is that really the direction we want to go, or is that just another bad idea?
If they are happening here, or could happen here off our coast, Monterey Bay Aquarium feels a sense of responsibility to explore exactly what you're talking about. What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks as they exist now? And what could we do to maybe mitigate some of those impacts in order to achieve that renewable energy future? In this case, in particular, the aquarium and our conservation team have found ourselves brokering these conversations and trying to advance the science, the community engagement, bring sectors together to look at the data, to look at that cost benefit analysis, and to find a way to preserve our incredible ecological heritage we have off our coast, and also have our state be an exemplar of the future that we want to get to.
Okay, and I have to ask one last thing. Obviously, I'm from Texas, so energy was everything in Texas. It didn't matter what flavor. I also read stories about harnessing the power of waves to generate electricity. Now, that seems to make a lot of good sense, and yet I've seen nothing recently about it.
That is a little bit of a tip of the iceberg in terms of all the potential renewable energy technologies that they're thinking about deploying in the ocean environment, as well as the fact that it might seem relatively harmless in pilot form, but when you get to the scale that is needed, both in terms to service the economy as well as to incentivize the type of investment needed in the equipment itself, that's when, especially when you start to think about, okay, if this gets to be X large with this much equipment, this much operations, then what is the real end goal that we want to get to? And let's go from there and think about how we can make this sustainable.
Support for Optimism in Action comes from the Monterey College of Law, a nonprofit law school serving the Monterey Bay region with evening classes on campus or in a hybrid online format. More details and applications available at montereylaw.edu. That's montereylaw.edu.
Aimee, I just wanted to follow up on some of the policy work that you're doing, because we hear the alarming news coming out of climate scientists across the world. We saw the incredible destruction to Jamaica, and it's hard to believe that it is an island that can recover or perhaps even should recover with its location and rising sea levels. But we seem to be in an environment right now in the United States where clean energy is actually a dirty phrase, where the environmental work that was moving us forward and some of the things that you've talked about is actually stopped and perhaps even prohibited. What are you doing and some of the partners that you work with doing to maintain momentum in this particular environment?
Perseverance is the name of the game these days and persevere wherever and however we can. It is so fortunate that among aquariums and zoos, the people who work in aquariums and zoos are so motivated to do what's right for the animals and the ecosystems that are in our care. And we want our institutions to be beacons of this is how the world should be, not just in presenting the animals in kind of pristine environments, but also in walking the talk. In 2016, the aquarium helped launch what's called an Aquarium Conservation Partnership, which now has become a network of 35 aquariums and zoos across the country who have committed to making collective environmental and ocean impact. And one of the things we do is we've committed to emission reduction goals at the aquarium. We want to reach net zero emissions by 2030, and we are working across institutions to share stories about how do we get there, how do we communicate that with our audiences, keeping those stories alive about why this is important, especially if you care about nature, and what are institutions to keep it going. And then, yes, of course, collectively, we are continuing to beat the drum on how important these policies are, especially at the state level, where some of us might have a little bit more traction to advance those policies, help advance those policies. And then at the federal level, continuing to submit comments, continuing to stand in coalition, continuing to bring science-based information to the champions that we do have in Washington, D.C. One thing about aquariums and zoos is across parties, people love to hear from us. And so we have great access to continue to communicate and bring those messages and communicate that our audiences are telling us that they want them and all of us to take these actions.
Aimee, some people may be surprised to find out that the aquarium's not inherently against commercial fishing, but it is in favor of policies that support sustainable fishing here in the United States and around the world.
I mean, we are all about a sustainable source of a major protein, which includes fish. And in terms of where it comes from and how it was raised and fish and caught, that is something that we believe in.
As I mentioned at the beginning, I grew up in a landlocked state. I'm from Iowa. Most of my family is still in the Midwest. And making it real for people who aren't next to the ocean, why is it important that the efforts they make, use a plastic bag or a plastic straw or any number of other things that you've identified as important?
We're all connected is such a huge narrative for our institutions to communicate to both our audience members. And this is, again, why speaking across the country and bringing these messages to people who either live on the coast or inland. All of us who do this for a living and see the data every day and recognize that what happens over here absolutely has an impact over there. We need to keep getting those stories out. We need to keep not only asking people to take action, but explaining why those actions are important, explaining why refusing to use a plastic bag or asking your grocer not to use them. These are market signals. These are seemingly small things, but if enough people do them, the market responds, your decision makers respond. And these policies then can help elevate society to the next level of solutions. What we try to do is tell those stories, say this is how your actions lead up to the greater good. And by the way, Monterey Bay Aquarium and our partners are out there in the world trying to take what your actions are doing and multiply them on a larger scale. And I think that knowing that they are joining us in taking action, I think might give them a little bit more hope that actually their actions matter and that something can be done.
Following up on the idea of individual action, I know there's a lot of opportunity for volunteerism, particularly when you live on the coast. There are things such as beach cleanups, aquarium volunteers. And in fact, I know becoming a Monterey Bay Aquarium volunteer is one of the most marquee opportunities in our community. I have friends who do it. I know you have to study. It's not just walk in and you get the job. But there's marine mammal rescues. There's all of these things that go on. Talk a little about other things that individuals can do if this is an area that resonates with them.
First of all, we love our volunteers. And yes, they have to go through a lot to don those red jackets that you see them wearing at the aquarium. That is among the best things. In addition to voting, one of the best things that individuals can do is get involved. The more you participate, the more you join organizations that are serving the public good, you magnify your impact when you join others to do those things. That is an automatic way to increase your impact. Those that are fighting this fight, especially those that are at nonprofit organizations like Monterey Bay Aquarium, we appreciate that so much. We appreciate and value the time that individuals are willing to give us on a volunteer basis. You will find if you do that, you will be among others that share your values and that get excited about the same things you do. So it's really a win-win situation.
We've talked about what others can do to get involved and get educated. And I'm just wondering for you, especially in the climate, no pun intended, that we're currently in, what helps you stay optimistic that the momentum that we've gained, that forward motion is going to continue?
I mean, I have to say sometimes it gets hard. I think what particularly hits me and my colleagues are the real impact and the hardship that our federal colleagues are having right now. I could have easily gone into federal service and been part of these agencies who are also committed to making our world a better place, to protecting our environment and the species that make up our ecosystems. And so it is hard when they represent such a huge amount of experience and expertise that we need to continue to move forward. So I will say it has been a trying time. Now, I think all of us, though, have each other's backs. Keep going, keep doing it, keep finding innovative, creative paths. If you don't have leverage here, where do you have leverage? Where can you keep the conversation going? And if you still have resources, help those who don't. Anybody whose job is wanting to protect the environment and beautiful animals, you're going to find a sense of camaraderie and of joy and optimism. So that, I think, has really helped to sustain us. We're lucky to be in a state where there are a lot of communities that do want to keep going. We have a lot of government leaders who want to keep taking action. And we also have wonderful laboratories here off our coast to do the type of research and science that's needed to create solutions for the future.
Aimee, thank you very much for joining us today. Let me share on our behalf, we have your back as well as you have those of your colleagues. What you've provided for our community and the literally thousands of people that come each year through the Monterey Bay Aquarium, both as educational as well as just a enriching family experience. It's just amazing. It's one of my favorite things to do and always will be. Thank you for what you and the aquarium are doing.
Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic experience. Thank you, everybody listening right now. So many members of our community love the aquarium and support it. So I just want to say thank you.
Thanks so much for everything that you're doing and for joining us on Sidebar today. Mitch, it was so great to have this conversation with Aimee. And I have to say, leaving California and leaving the ocean has been one of the things I truly mourn and miss from my time there. The reason I asked her that question about how to make sense of it for people who aren't living next to the ocean is that idea of interconnectedness that she talked about, and that really needing people to understand. And we got into it a little bit, but for example, we're having a big immigration conversation in this country right now. And climate change and what happened in Jamaica or in Sudan with famine or in any other country or even state in the United States is going to result in migration. When we talk about public health, that too is involved in how climate change is affecting food production, how environmental regulation affects the cleanliness of the air and the water and the food we eat. So I just think it's important for people to understand that this idea of climate change is not an abstract issue. It affects everything from the prices that we pay in the grocery store to the immigration debate that we're having on a national stage. So sometimes I think it's too abstract, and we need to just remind people that it affects all of us in every part of our lives.
And I think we can also look with some optimism to know that even in these times when there may be uncertainty with federal policy, or in some cases state policy related to these issues, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, as we learned, is one of a coalition of 22 leading U.S. aquariums. They're nonprofits. They're funded through community support and grants and other sources. They just keep doing the good work. The federal government may be shutting down portions, but the aquarium is not missing a beat. And in fact, as she said, they're stepping up to have the back of those who may be put to the side temporarily so that they can continue that work. And I think that's a great reminder that there are people out there and organizations out there that have a long-term view and a long-term passion to get these things right. And certainly the Monterey Bay Aquarium is one of those.
Once again, I want to thank everyone who joined us today on Sidebar. And as always, Mitch and I would love to know what's on your mind. You can reach us at SideBarMedia.org.
Sidebar would not be possible without our producer David Eakin, who composes and plays all of the music you hear on Sidebar. Thank you also to Dina Dowsett, who creates and coordinates Sidebar's social media marketing.
Optimism in Action is produced in collaboration with KAZU, your NPR station for the Monterey Bay area of California. You'll find this episode and archived episodes at kazu.org/sidebar.